entire career today. We're going to be looking at him the next 2-3 days. But like I said, while we're going and looking at Alexander the Great, I want you thinking, does he deserve this title, the Great? Is this some guy who we should all be looking up to, or maybe have, historians gone and kind of given him a lot of credit? So let's get going. And yes, in real life, he did have a nose. His statue just got broken. So before we can talk about Alexander, we got to talk about his dad, Philip II of Macedon. Now, Macedonia is going to be a small little city-state in the northern Balkan Peninsula. So it is north of Greece, right over here. So we see Macedon is going to wind up controlling a lot of territory. Eventually, the city-state is going to expand its power. And Macedonia is going to become really strong as Greece itself is becoming super weak in the Peloponnesian War. Remember, we talked last week or the week before that about a war, 2 weeks ago, about a war that Athens and Sparta fought, the Peloponnesian League versus the Delian League, that lasted 27 years. Now, I want you thinking about this. If any of you guys are athletes and have gone to practice, does anyone know the term running a suicide? Does anyone play basketball or soccer and have to do those before, or lacrosse? Danny says, yeah. So what's running a suicide, Danny? Oh, you've heard about it? Eliza, do you know what it is, darling? Or anybody? I don't know if she's typing or not. The delay of online teaching. Oh, you have heard of it but never done it. All right, so when you're going and running a suicide, essentially your coach has you run from one line to another, and then you run to a further line, and then back, and then to another line that's even further and back. My old soccer coach loved to do this sort of thing too. And it's good for conditioning, going and really punishing them if they didn't do what they wanted in practice and all that. And let me tell you, you are exhausted after running a suicide. And I would say that is very similar to fighting a civil war for 27 years. The Greek city-states are drained. They are wiped out. They've been fighting so long. So many people have lost their lives. So many people have been injured and unable to do their lives as they would have before. So many farms destroyed. So many businesses. And things are crushed in Greece. Now, meanwhile, in the north, we have the Macedonians, who don't take part in the Peloponnesian War. Now, most Greeks did not think much about the Macedonians. They said, well, these people, they're not real Greeks. They live in tiny little villages. We have great cities like Athens and Corinth. And they spoke with an accent. Now, my cherubs, we know here at Frederick Classical Charter School, and I'm sure all of you, now, the way someone speaks does not necessarily dictate the kind of person they are. We know that, character and all of these things aren't shown by how you speak, and that we judge people by who they are and their virtue and merit as opposed to what they sound like. But I have a question. If we had 2 guest speakers come into class, one speaking in a British accent using many superfluous words and sounding quite elegant, and discussing matters of historical significance. Then you had another guy kind of dressed in rags and a straw hat, and he's going to tell you a little bit about history. What does your gut say? Who is the person you're going to think is more credible? What does your gut say? Who's probably going to have the best information?
British guy.
Danny says the British guy. What do you say, Kadir? The British guy. So we have these prejudices, these ideas. I'm glad Kirthanis should believe both, because, we want to be looking at that. But we have these natural prejudices that often our ideas, our brains, jump to a conclusion before we have all the facts. And so when the Greeks saw the Macedonians, who maybe spoke or speak as we sometimes think about people with a southern drawl, They didn't think they were as smart as other Greeks, which we know that's completely ludicrous because how you speak, your accent is just from where you're from. But Macedonia is going to start changing once we get Philip II taking the throne. Philip II, he hated how the other Greek city-states thought of Macedonia. Because Philip II is like, we're Greeks just like you, whereas the other Greeks are like, you're not Greek. You're fake Greek. You're pretenders, posers. And so Philip II says, well, the best way to get the Greeks to respect me is to conquer them. So Philip II changes the Macedonian army. It's one of his first things. He goes and develops something called the Phalanx. Now, we've talked about the Phalanx before at Thermopylae, at Marathon, at all the Greek battles besides Salamis, because that was on water. The Greeks fought in a phalanx. We remember that. Remember, they fight side by side, close together, their shields overlapping, protecting each other. That was really strong. The Persians couldn't beat it. But Philip II gets an even better idea. He says, what if we give them extremely long spears called sarissas? And when I say extremely long spears, so right now there's probably a good, 10 to 15 feet between me and Maddox, okay? These sarissa spears, I could probably walk over to where Danny is, who's on the other side of the room, so maybe 20-something feet. These spears are like 18, 20 feet long. So imagine if Danny, with his sarissa spear, could poke out Maddox's eyes from all over there. Could Maddox hurt Danny if he's on the other side of the room? No. I mean, unless Maddox has a bow and arrow or something like that. So now, the Macedonian army, they are super strongly defended because they have their overlapping shields. They have all of their armor. They have these extremely long spears. That means no one can get even close to them. Makes a strong army. They also say, you know what? Maybe we could learn a little bit from the Persians. Because the Greeks only fought with their hoplites typically before that. They're big, strong, heavily armored guys. It doesn't give them much maneuverability, mobility. So they start having cavalry. That's when Ivan hops on the back of a horse and has his spear or sword and ruins people's days by running them over and slicing and dicing them. He goes and says, we should have archers. So that's when, Cortez and Riley and Zoe, they have bows and arrows. And from a really, really long distance, make poor people look like pincushions. So Philip II is going to make the Macedonian army one of the strongest armies the world had ever seen. And he marches south and starts conquering Greece. Now, did Philip II truly need one of the strongest armies the world had ever seen at this point? Probably not. Greece was weak. They just fought a 27-long-year war. But the fact that Greece was weak, the fact that Philip II had created such a powerful army, he crushes the Greek opposition. In fact, he conquers everyone except Sparta. Because you know what? Sparta just said, we're good, we're staying out of this. So all of Greece around Sparta was conquered, and Sparta didn't lift a spear to help. It's actually one of these things that that some of the Greeks said, hey, we should be paying attention to up north there, Demosthenes, an Athenian, is like, I think the Macedonians are going to try to conquer us. We should work together and stop that. And the other Greek city states like, no, we don't want to work together. That'll never happen. Those Macedonians, those hillbillies out in the sticks, they're not going to hurt us. And then, they conquer all of Greece. Any questions or comments thus far? Alrighty then. We shall persevere forward. It is, Kirthana. It is. So let's take a look at this. So this is the Phalanx. If you're unfamiliar with the Phalanx, again, this is just review from it. That's pretty fearsome, yeah? I wouldn't want to be around that. Look how long those spears are. Look how scary that camera view would be. Yeah, it's not something good. And so right here, Lord willing, it will work. There is a clip. Let's see if this is going to work or not. Come on. Yes. So this is going to be a reenactor going and utilizing the sarissa. Now, this is a little bit of a later reenactment. So this is from really the Roman period, which is not going to be long after Alexander the Great, but isn't entirely, the same. Look how tall that is. Isn't that wild? And he's going to show himself moving. And think about, it's not going to be the easiest thing to control. Alexander and Philip II's army, ostensibly, they're going to be incredibly well trained. They are going to be some of the strongest, well-trained soldiers in the world at this time. And they're going to be fiercely loyal to their leader. Yeah. So imagine you have hundreds of guys with those things charging after you. I mean, that could really ruin your day. All right, now let's see here. Can I get back? How can I make my slide go forward? It's been so long since I've gotten to do this. Technical difficult. There we go. Got it. Now, Philip II had a dream to conquer Persia. He, once again, saw himself as Greek. And he was really mad. He's like, man, that Darius, that Xerxes, those jerks, they tried to conquer Greece, my homeland. Even though the Greeks didn't recognize Macedonia as Greek. And he wanted his own revenge. So his dream was to conquer Persia. Now, Philip II had just basically finished going and conquering Greece. He was marching in front of his men, and one of his sworn to protect him bodyguards rushes forward and murders Philip II. We have no idea why this happened. They didn't get to question him because the other bodyguards quickly wound up pouncing on that guy and really ruining his day. We have many theories. I read a book about this about a year or two ago, thinking that perhaps, there's all of these theories. Some people say, well, maybe it was Alexander's mom because she wanted Alexander to take the throne because another son might wind up going and replacing Alexander. Other people say that it was someone that Philip was actually planning on marrying and then didn't because of Alexander's mother, and then she had him. I mean, there's so many theories, and no one knows for certain why Philip was assassinated. But assassinated he was. So Alexander, at the ripe old age of 20, now inherits an empire and is now king and leader of the strongest army that had been created in the world. And from his birth, he had been groomed for this. He had been in the army. He'd been getting military training. He'd been getting education. Aristotle, just like the song says, I taught Alexander the Great. Aristotle. Yet Aristotle, one of our philosophers, taught Alexander. So he had an excellent education, and he was ready for this. So here's the thing, though. This young kid becomes king. Immediately, the Greek city-states said, the kids are all, no way, we're going to rebel. And so, Alexander shows what he's made of. He quickly crushes the city-state of Thebes. And he says, it's very simple. You rebel against me, I'm going to destroy your city, sell your people to slavery. With that kind of harsh response, how many city-states do you think tried to rebel after that? Kadir? Kadir said 0. Khan says none. Kirthana says none. That is the correct answer. People said, oh, well, if that's what he's going to be like, we'll just try to stay on his good side. And one of the things, though, we're going to find out, though, Alexander the Great, when you don't rebel, when you listen to him, much like the Persians he's going to then conquer, treated his people with love and respect. When he goes to Egypt, we're going to find out later on, he's going to be hailed as a savior and a god. But we'll get to that later. So that is our notes for the day, my cherubs. I'm going to stop the recording Do we have any questions or comments?